What exactly is business English? It's important to understand that before you actually start learning it. There are a lot of misunderstandings about this, and that's what I'm going to teach you in this video. What exactly is business English, and how can you learn it? I'm going to be sharing examples as well. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to see future videos. And now, let's get into it. What is business English? Does it even exist as a thing? That might sound like a silly question, but I think it is a worthwhile question to ask. I think what people think is business English isn't business English. There's no such thing as business English if we're talking about a whole other language, right? It's not like there are two levels, and one level is business English and another level is general English. No, it's not like that. What business English actually is regular English with a few tweaks here and there, depending on the situation. There's no clear and simple difference. Oh, that's business English. That's not. Oh, that's general English. That's business English. No, it's not like that at all. As with many things in real life, the line between one thing and another is fuzzy. But we can explore this. So I want to just break down for you what business English actually is into a few different categories, and I want to give you some examples as well, because I want you to have a framework in your mind for how to understand this so that you can make sure you're learning the right type of things for your workplace interactions, for your professional interactions. All right? So yes, it is a thing, but it's not the thing that many people think that it is. Okay, so let's start with, I think, the most important. Well, maybe not. I don't know what the most important is. Let's start with jargon. So jargon is a specialized word or phrase that is used in a specific situation, a specific industry, right? A specific type of context. So let's say, for example, people who work in the tech community, right? Well, it's very comfortable for them to say, when they say cloud, we're not talking about clouds in the sky. We know cloud means the cloud, right? Storage on the internet, right? AWS, Google Cloud, that's what it's called, right? That sort of thing. That's what we're talking about. ML. Oh, ML. People know what ML is. If you know what ML is, then you're able to have the conversations with others who also know what that is. And those who don't know what that is probably don't need to have those conversations, right? So it's specific language. I know that ML means machine learning. I know what an API is. I know what people mean when they say front end and back end. We're not talking about a person's front side or back side, right? These are things specific to, let's say broadly, tech, but there are things specific to finance and banking and healthcare and a lot of different things. And if you're in those spaces, you eventually pick up all of the key jargon that you need. If you don't know it, you can easily figure it out by asking someone or searching it on Google, right? Very easy. So that part of it is not hard. And what that means is that business English is different for everybody depending on where they are, depending on their context. Do you work in tech? Do you work in customer support? One thing to keep in mind is you don't want to assume that someone who is not in your, let's say, domain or space, you don't want to assume that they know what you're talking about. So when you're talking to other people in that space, you're a customer service representative and you have a bunch of specialized terms that you use when you're doing customer service and working with other people who are in the same field, you don't want to assume that when you talk to someone who doesn't work in that space that they will also know that. This is something I do often see among English learners. They assume that once they learn something, that they can use those things with everybody, use those special jargon terms with everyone. No. Even a native speaker who is not involved in that space whatsoever is very likely to not know a special jargon term, right? If I said ML to my mother or something, she wouldn't know what that means. And that's fine. That's because she's not close to that space. Okay. Right? So keep that in mind. When you're speaking generally to people, use general words and phrases. And when you're in your niche, then use your jargon, which you'll pick up over time. Okay. Now, besides this, so the first is jargon. The other piece of what we can call business English is a specific way of talking, but I want to highlight that this specific way of talking is culture specific. That means in every company, there may be a different culture and a different way of communicating. That could be words and phrases like jargon, but it could also be how people interact in general. Are people more direct, right? Do people speak very conversationally? Does this company have a slightly more formal feel to it, right? It's a somewhat formal culture. And different industries will be very different. Depending on where you work, right, you will find yourself in a different type of, let's say, language culture. And so you have to just get a feel for that and learn it over time. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. So this can be different from what we call general English, but it can also be the same. So it's not necessarily that you must use one because you work in this culture and that's what you have to use. It's that it's more likely that you would say it this way in this type of culture, not that you can't use it in your daily life. Let me give you an example. Okay. So if I say that I want to touch base next week, if I say let's touch base next week, okay? What's the difference between that and saying let's chat next week? They're the same thing, kind of, but one of them is more focused on communicating about a specific thing to make sure we're both up to date about what the other person is doing. So touch base is more likely to be used in a workplace setting, and chat is more likely to be used casually, out in the world. Not that either of them couldn't be used in either case, right? So it's not that you have to use one. It's that touch base is more likely to be used in the workplace. But then again, it depends on which type of workplace. So there's no one answer to this. That's why I say culture specific. Every company has its own culture and its own way of communicating, right? Some companies may have this cutthroat communication style where we all speak very directly to each other, and we don't say, could you please or would you mind? We say, I need you to, right? And make sure you. Okay, well, that's the culture of this company, but a lot of companies will have the more, let's say, polite, respectful language when we make requests. Would you mind? Could you please? And that would be closer to, let's say, what you would use in a restaurant. Could I please? Would you mind giving me, right? And so there is a lot of overlap there. I just want to make it clear that this is business English. This is general English. It's not like that. Okay. How about we need to get on the same page? We need to get on the same page. Okay. Same page is often, again, focused on making sure that we are aligned. We need to make sure we're aligned. This type of language is more likely to be used in a workplace situation. And in daily life, we might say we need to understand each other. We need to understand each other is kind of broader, maybe emotionally, maybe the meaning that we have. There are a lot of different ways that we could mean that. That doesn't mean that we can't say in general English, we need to get on the same page. Absolutely. I say it all the time. But I'm just saying one is more common than the other. Would you like to weigh in? Would you like to weigh in on this? Could you weigh in on this? As opposed to general English, what do you think? Could you use what do you think in a workplace setting? Absolutely. Would you like to weigh in, or could you weigh in on this? More likely to be used in the workplace. Again, we could call that more business English. It feels more like you want to back up what you say with some kind of supporting evidence, right? It can't just be a random opinion. You're not just talking casually, well, I think, I don't know. Usually, if you weigh in, you have carefully considered your view, and maybe you have some support behind it. It's a little bit more formal, right? And it's a little bit beyond saying simply what you think. You wouldn't as often hear in daily life, I think we need to pivot. You would often hear that in the workplace, especially for teams who are building things, creating things, making strategic decisions. If you're trying something, you're measuring it, it's not working, then you might need to make a change, a strategic change, and that would be called a pivot. So that would be more likely to be used in business English in the workplace. And if we say that in general English in daily life, it might be a little odd. It might sound a bit odd. What do you mean pivot? Pivot is like change strategy in a sense, right? In regular life, general English, we might say, I don't know if this is working. I don't know if this is working. Whatever we've tried. You could say pivot, but I think it would be a bit awkward there, okay? So those are just a few examples of things you would be more likely to hear in the workplace or more likely to hear in daily life, general English. Okay, so far we've talked about two things. We've talked about jargon, and we've talked about culture-specific ways of talking in a workplace, all right? There's also, generally in business English, and I'm always putting that in quotes, a focus on clarity, where in general English we can get away with, well, being casual. There's no pressure on us to be very clear all the time, right? When you walk around and you see a tree and you say, right? No one can say, hey, that's not an efficient way of talking. You're not accomplishing anything by saying that, making those noises, right? Hey, this is just me out in the world. I'm allowed to look at a tree and make some noises, right? So, in general, in life, there's not a lot of pressure to be concise, clear, and to the point. But in the workplace, there usually is pressure to do that. Because if you're not clear, then that means you're wasting people's time. If you're rambling on, then you're wasting people's time. If you don't know how to express things well, right, and you're imprecise in your language, you're wasting people's time. So it could be as simple as saying, for example, I agree, instead of saying, yeah, I guess. Right? If you were in a meeting with someone and someone wanted to know if you are pro or against something, and you said, yeah, I guess. That's not very clear. Other people in the meeting will wonder, okay, well, what do you actually think? Yes or no, right? But if you have an opinion one way or the other, you should be clear in that meeting so that we can move forward. So just say, I agree. I agree. Okay, great. So now we can move on, right? And saying, yeah, I guess, doesn't allow us to move on because we're still not clear on what you think. But if someone says, do you want to go get ice cream? And you say, yeah, I guess. Then that's good enough, right? Good enough. Let's go. So it's just different the way that it feels and the impact that it has. And there's, again, less pressure out there in the world to be very precise and very clear. Now, the last point I want to make about, and I think this is all adding up to what I call business English, really what business English is. Business English tends to be action-oriented speech. So, for example, can you keep me in the loop? If I say keep me in the loop, I've asked you a question and it is connected to you doing something very clear either now or later. So keep me in the loop means when anything changes, I need to know about it. So don't just go off and do things. Come back to me, tell me what's happening. It's kind of a very clear instruction. I'm giving you very clear action. But if I say, can you let me know what's going on? That's kind of asking the same thing, but it's more vague, right? So in your daily life, you might say, can you let me know what's going on? Just tell me right now what's happening generally. It's not really a future request, and it's not very precise. And again, that's fine, but you'd be more likely to hear in the workplace, can you keep me in the loop? How about this? What's the status? As opposed to how's it going? Which one of those feels like something you would say to a colleague? Probably what's the status? Now, you could say how's it going, but if you say how's it going, how do you take that? It depends on the situation. How's it going? I'm good. No. How's it going with the thing that you're working on? Oh, okay. It's going pretty well. But if I say what's the status, then I need you to explain to me clearly right now the progress that you're making toward a specific goal, right? And so there's a bit more action there. We're speaking almost as an instruction to others about what to do, rather than being a little bit more general, a bit more roundabout, right? How about this one? I'll have it to you by end of day Thursday. And if that's a text, that might be written as EOD. Okay. As opposed to I might do it eventually. Now, both of those are related to actions, but if I say I'll have it to you by end of day Thursday, I'm giving a specific deadline. I'm taking specific actions that will lead me to finish it by the end of Thursday. And if I say I might do it eventually, I'll do it eventually, it almost means nothing, right? And again, that's fine, except if you're trying to get stuff done, it makes things harder, okay? So I hope now, by explaining to you why this idea of business English, why it's not clear, that you feel more clear about it. It's often described as this concrete thing, like a separate language. You learn French or you learn business English, and it's not like that at all. It is, as we've said, it's generally more action-oriented. There's a focus on clarity. There's differences in the way people communicate in different company cultures, and you have to pick that up depending on where you work. And of course, there's jargon that you learn. Often you can just learn that by interacting with people. And remember that jargon is not something everybody knows. So it's usually specific to your field or where you work, and that allows you to communicate more efficiently, but not everyone knows it. Okay? So if you have any questions about this, let me know. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and also get a free course, Natural English Conversations, in the links in the description.